Hey everybody, today I'm interviewing Adam Curry, the Podfather. Adam Curry was the co-founder of podcasting along with Dave Weiner back in 2001. He was also one of MTV's first VJs on TV, setting up all those music videos. He's a radio broadcaster. He is a tech founder who made an exit in 98 right before the dot-com bubble. He's the co-creator of Podcasting 2.0. He owned a helicopter company for a little bit. In about 30 seconds, you're going to see the irony of me doing this intro. I did not want to do an intro, especially after how we start the podcast. But Adam's had this very interesting career, and our conversation kind of touched on a lot of different points. And so I want to just highlight a few of the things we talked about. And I'm going to put lots of chapter markers down below so that you can skip ahead to sections that you might find really interesting. In this episode, we talk about what it's like to be a guest on Joe Rogan's podcast. We talk about how Adam got into pirate radio when he was just a kid, the importance of creating a feedback mechanism between you as a podcaster and your audience, how Adam found co-hosts for all four of his podcasts and the dynamic that he's built with each of them. We talk about why Adam thinks actually having two people on a podcast is one of the best formats for a show. We talk about how podcasting kind of challenged and then broke linear broadcasting, how to sustain your podcast, even from a financial perspective, but also emotional. And then we talk about the pitfalls of trying to be a popular podcast. We talk about value for value and podcasting 2.0. And then we wrap up with some of the similarities from what's happening right now in podcasting and what happened over 20 years ago when it first started out. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do as well. I like not doing a preview. There's some of these shows now that feel there's like this huge intro, and it kind of like it kills the magic sometimes.
Well, this is what reality television taught us, is like people actually want, although of course the reality of reality television is subjective, but with the initial idea, and I think podcasting in general is the thought that anything can happen. This is just people talking. It's not necessarily. That's Joe Rogan. I mean, even though he may start, sometimes he starts with an intro, a long one. Usually he just starts. He's just starting, and then there you're talking, and before you know it, you've talked for 3 hours, and everyone listened in. It was great.
One of my favorite intros he ever had was an episode with you, where the first thing he did, he just looked across, he goes, "Oh, flip phone, respect."
Dude, you have a flip phone.
I do.
Stepped out.
OTG, brother.
Yeah, you figured it out. And he just like enjoys you've got a flip phone. And do you think he plans it? Because then it's like this whole conversation about privacy and why you have a flip phone.
No. I've talked to him about this. I said, "What do you do to prep?" He says, "Nothing." I say, "Well, how about if someone has a book?" He'll listen. So has he ever listened to my podcast? Yeah, he's listened to maybe one while he was working out. If someone comes in with a book, he'll listen to the audio book while he's working out. He likes watching. He'll watch movies and stuff like that. But I think he's genuinely curious, and he has some information as to why someone is there. Obviously, because no one gets on the Joe Rogan show without Joe wanting them on the show. And this is not. He has I call it a booking coordinator, but not someone who's really, this guy. Oh, I mean, that's not true, but you can be the hottest person on earth, and if Joe doesn't want to talk to you, then you just won't be on the show. It's out of his own curiosity, as far as I know.
Yeah, I remember there's a period, I think, where Trump's team was trying to get on, and he was like, "Look, if you don't want to come in the studio, honestly, I don't think it's going to be a good interview because, I'm going to have to challenge you on a bunch of stuff." And the idea that somebody turned down Trump when he was like running he was all over Twitter, he's the biggest news story every day, and he said, "I'm not really interested in that interview." Kudos to Joe for making that decision.
And I talked to him about that, and I think he kind of used the reason that the Trump team wanted to do it at the White House and not in the studio as an excuse. I just think he wasn't interested. I think he would not get a genuine person who would really open up, and that's the kind of person that he's not interested in. And I think that's probably a good policy.
So what's it like for you to be on Joe Rogan? You've been on like 5 times, right?
I'm always very nervous. I don't like video, so F you for doing this on video. That's why I got into podcasting. That's why I love radio. I did a lot of video, but I could control my Tourette's and everything for, a couple minute segment. On MTV, it's a lot harder. So I just kind of have to give into it. And all right, I am who I am. But I think it distracts sometimes from what I'm saying. So I'm just not a big fan of that. But once I'm sitting there, I'm just in the zone, and I'm just talking to Joe. I mean, we text from time to time, just a little back and forth, or an article or something, or how you doing, or Happy Father's Day. That's probably the extent of it. So for me, it's a catch up. And like, what's going on? And here's what I'm seeing. And, and I hear about what he's been doing, or, I'm just as curious about how he is as he is about me.
So I went back and I watched a bunch of interviews you did and listened to a bunch, and a few of them were Rogan. I noticed you go on in 2020 in the beginning of the year, and you're in LA, and you're like, I've been in Austin like 11 years and I love it. Rogan's like, okay, Austin, Texas, I don't really get it. By November of that year, he signed the Spotify deal. He's moved to Austin. You're the first interview in the new studio. And he's going, man, I love Austin.
Well, what happened, he called me after that interview, and I don't know if he does that, but he said, man, I really, really enjoyed our interview. I really want to thank you for coming in. I had a good time. And then he called me and he said, man, I'm thinking of moving to Texas, Dallas or Houston. I said, no. You need to come to Austin. That's where you need to be.
A lot of people will know you as the Podfather. Many people will know you as the co-creator of podcasting, or one of the first VJs on MTV. But I kind of want to go back a little bit further to a young Adam Curry in Denmark who decides, I want to get on pirate radio. What's the story there?
First of all, it was the Netherlands. So
the Netherlands.
It's easy to confuse Dutch with Denmark, etc., but it was Holland. So I was south of Amsterdam. When I was, I guess, around 12, 13, 14, my parents gave me for Christmas 101 projects from Radio Shack, which I still have it. It's like a wooden box. It's open, more like a serving tray. And in it, there's all these components: resistors, diodes, capacitors, relays, all these different things, a photoelectric cell. And they're mounted on this on a board inside the serving tray, and they had little springs next to each connector, and you also had a little battery pack. And so the idea was you had this big book, and you open it up and it'd show you this project. So, but then there was the FM radio. It was a lot of wires. You had to connect a lot of things. I don't even think I looked at the schematic. I don't care. I want to be able to, let me see this work on the FM radio. And then you use the supplied crystal ear set, which normally put into here, and it kind of that brownish geriatric look to it, because literally hearing aids back in the day, that's what, even there were no iPods or earpods. These were just a crystal that reverberated in your ear.
It's kind of like it was like a brown plastic thing, exactly. And you'd kind of like slide it in your, I remember that.
Nasty, and you'd have ear goop on it and stuff. It didn't even, it's the same color as the outside. So you use that as the microphone. And, with a little wire for the antenna, and it worked. You could broadcast maybe, 10 feet or maybe a little bit further than that. I'm like, wow. And this, of course, is where immediately my knowledge of antennas started, And then I got into CB radios, which were illegal in Holland, but I, bought one on vacation, brought it back. It had, and also I was a real Radio Shack guy. Everything realistic, Tandy, that was my brand. And so I was using single sideband, snipping a diode inside of it so you can move up to the 10-meter band, which is really the amateur radio band. But it was cleaner there. There was not enough, not as many people on it. And then with 12 watts from my bedroom with a 5.5 meter antenna on the roof, which I'd rigged with a pulley. So, so I could, only when I was broadcasting would it go up and then it would go down. And at that time, it was just when the sunspots were at the highest level. We're back into another solar cycle now. So your signal would skip across the ocean very easily. And so I learned a lot about radio. And, I also was a little bit into music. My dad was a big music head. He had a reel-to-reel recorder, and he would record all his albums onto it. And so I learned how a reel-to-reel recorder worked early on, big reel job. The difference between slow recording and the length you'd get versus fast recording and the less length you'd get. And so I built a radio transmitter, repurposed a television antenna on the roof into an FM transmitter, and just started broadcasting. And I had one turntable, so I just put on like ELO, which is one of my dad's records, or Elton John Blue Moves or something, not really, interesting. Later I had the Beatles Red Double album, Blue Double album. I played those to death. I love those so much. And then my mom, God bless her, would drive me around the block in her Volvo and see how far the signal went. And then when we got back to the house, there's some kids sitting there going like, hey, we heard your signal, man. We heard your station. Now, the reason why that was interesting is the Netherlands had almost no television or radio supply. It was all government controlled at the time. So on television, you had two stations, Holland 1, Holland 2. They both, it would be test pattern until 7 p.m. Then it would go on with bong, a big gong, and it would be news, the same guy at the same time on both channels with the same news. And the radio was the same. They had 4 stations. There were, however, at the time, some pirate stations in the North Sea on ships. This originated both from the Netherlands and from the UK, who also had this strict BBC non-commercial system. And so you had these renegades, these pirate ships, and they were like Radio Caroline, Radio Mi Amigo, Radio Veronica. Those are the big ones. And they were playing stuff from the States. So they were playing early Stones and, like kind of hippy dippy, whatever in the 70s kind of music before disco. You could get them only on medium wave, long wave. So you had to have, just your regular AM radio wouldn't even receive it. And at the time, you could get radios that had long wave and short wave. But a lot of people were tuning into that, and they had commercials, and I think at a certain point one of them even had Wolfman Jack at night. So it was really a joy to listen to. For me to become a pirate, a land pirate, an FM pirate, as it was called, was quite normal actually. And it was kind of seen as funny and cute. It wasn't like there were other people obviously doing this on a very small local level. And now I'm 15 and I'm kind of into this, and I have my little station. From time to time I flip it on. I've actually built my own mixer and got another turntable, got a microphone, and for months and months, if not years, I practiced under my, I had a loft bed, I practiced getting my voice low, talking like that. And my voice never actually changed dramatically when I went through puberty. I'd already forced it there. And then there was an ad in the local paper, a closed circuit hospital radio station at the Tulip Hospital, about 20 minutes up the road. They were looking for presenters and engineers. And you had to be 16, and my parents said, "Go ahead and lie and go and see if you can, if you can get some experience there." And they had a really professional studio, high-end stuff, like a real radio studio. And I applied to be both a presenter, which I failed the test. Also I had an accent. My Dutch wasn't all that great. I spoke fluent Dutch, but not like an American. They just didn't think it was appropriate because it was still very NPR-ish, But I was hired as an engineer. They took a gamble on me. That was really cool. And that's where I met, a whole bunch of interesting people who were also kind of there for the same reason, but also like this one guy, Jeroen van Inkel. He was a little older than I was, but he was spinning records at a club in Amsterdam. And he was really, he took this volunteer gig to use the studio after hours to produce stuff for this radio show he was doing on a big pirate station in Amsterdam called Radio Decibel. And Decibel was a bunch of, there was just misfits and weirdos, but all cool, and all just love music. And they were into, again, the top, the number 3 station, the kind of the popular music station run by the government is still playing Lawrence Welk and crap like that. And they're playing Chicago Warehouse, it's like, wow. And Blitz, and early Fun Boy 3, early U2 even, like early Brian Eno stuff. And we're talking 79, 80. And Jeroen said, "Hey man, you should come talk to these guys. Maybe do a show on Radio Decibel." I came in and they had, they barely had any money. They had one sponsor, some guy who sold kitchen tiles and cork floors. Ernst Bijl, and his 2 daughters were always hanging around the studio. It was kind of like they loved it, and so he just financed a bit so we could pay rent and and electricity and have like some drinks in the studio. No one was getting paid anything. And I remember it was a Saturday night, and you had to have the secret code to get up to this attic, apartment. And they're all these cool kids just hanging out on the couch, and they're sitting behind the DJ. And the DJ had this, nice setup. It was rigged together because we didn't have like professional cart machines or everything. We had multiple cassette decks. You'd hit play, and then the minute it hit the beginning of the jingle, whatever you want to use, you hit pause, hit stop, take it out, put a pencil in, turn the sprocket back a quarter turn, put it back in, pause and play at the same time. So then when you hit pause, it would start right away. So that was how you started jingles. And they had this ingenious system for records because it was just vinyl records. So they have a record player with the old vinyl record on top, and then this oversized felt mat, which was bigger than the record itself, and a relay, which would close and hold the mat so that the record underneath is still kind of turning, so there's some friction there. And the minute you open the fader, it would hit a micro switch, the relay opens, the felt grips the tape, grips the record underneath, and you could cue up the record to like a quarter revolution. So you could open up that fader and boom, your record started right away. Yeah, it was cool stuff. They said, why don't you do a show? Why don't you do between, midnight? Why don't you go spin for an hour? I'm like, there's all these people behind me and they're smoking weed and hanging out and drinking Bacardi Cokes, but they're cool. They're it's not weird. It was just weird to like, I'm not really, what am I doing here? And I said, why don't you do it in English? Yeah, I could do that. And I knew that would make me more comfortable. And so on the spot, I became John Holden. That was because you had to have an alias. And so I made this whole persona because they would call into the station. We published our phone number and people would call in. Every hour we called the phone in. And it became a thing. And it was phenomenal. And as this station just grew in popularity, we moved to our own little canal house that we had. We had, one floor in the basement. And we built a kick-ass studio, and then we had the transmitter up there. And I would always go up on the roof and with another guy, and we'd adjust the antenna because I had already been on roofs so many times by then. So that, and thus begat my pirate radio career. And the thing that I learned the most is put a musical program together, because we selected our own records, of course. And just how to make a vibe and a flow and formatting a show. I learned a lot of, sound and how to create sound that I liked, which is highly compressed. And, it's like I love a real ballsy broadcast sound, which turns out is really good for podcasts and earbuds mainly, where people listen in the different, it's not the same as speakers at home. Or even in the car, you also want kind of a piercing, a little bit more high end and some compression in there. So I just learned a lot about sound. I learned, I'm very adept at, starting things, so when I do No Agenda with John, we play upwards of 40 clips in 3 hours, and these are short clips. And I just, pop, jingle, get this, this. I search for something that we're talking about, play a little sound drop or whatever. I learned all of this throughout my entire career, 43 years now, including a lot from Scott Shannon at Z100 in New York. So I've just always been this radio guy, and I love kind of being the Wizard of Oz behind the knobs, make it look easy, but there's a lot going on, and I love the idea of recording live, direct, no editing. If there's a technical problem for our podcast, I'll fix it. But I'll usually leave most of the mess up in there because people love that. When it goes wrong, that's what people love the most. I think it's hilarious, and you become human and all these things, and it creates such a connection with the audience and that feedback loop. That's the thing that I really missed on. In the rest of my broadcast career, certainly at MTV, there was no feedback loop except, postcards and mail. And then by the time we got the podcast, we have email. And now, we have built into the app live chat rooms and people sending boostergrams and all kinds of stuff. And in fact, right now with Podcasting 2.0, we're seeing an entire resurgence of the concept of a live show where now it's for No Agenda. We have, between 2,000 and 2,500 people on a show day who are listening in, and they become the studio audience, and they have a voice. Like I have this little, out the corner of my eye, I see this basically just a text chat scrolling, And I can see, people that give me one-liners sometimes, which are great. Dvorak can say, "You didn't write that. Who gave you that line?" They'll say, they'll piss me off with something, antagonize me like a heckler. And so it becomes, it's like an extra level of sport. But I'm in tune. I'm in tune with the audience at that moment. That's really how I got to this point today, to understand, where I'm coming from is really from the basics of literally wiring up my first transmitter, understanding how it works, to the engineering side. And throughout my career, I've always, television was fascinating to me because you can't do it by yourself. You really need to do real proper now, it's gotten a little easier today, but still, you had camera operators, cable pullers, audio director, assistant director, producer, sound engineer, a switcher. I made sure that I knew how everybody's job worked. I could do everybody's job. Not as good as them, but I could do everybody's job. So when I saw the final product, I'm like, I go to the audio guy, "Hey man, when the band is performing on stage, open up the audience mics. It gives a little more live feel. You're cutting the mics. This is not cool. I don't want to just hear the music. I want to hear the people in the audience who are pumped." But even the shots that were made and camera guys and gals have always been my friends because they make me look good. If I have a Tourette's attack, they know, I'm going to offer a different shot to the director, so the director can't even cut to that. And they made me look good. At MTV, I had Curry Cash, and the camera would come up, and I'd be like, "Holy mackerel, this is a great shot. Celeste, hold on a second." I put $5 on top of her camera. "That's some Curry Cash. You make me look good, girl." It just became a thing. So I love working in that team, in a team environment. But in general, I love doing audio, just radio stuff. And I'm really good when I'm with someone else. I need someone to work with and bounce off of. That's it in a nutshell, Albin. End of interview. It was great knowing you.
I actually wrote some questions about co-hosts because I noticed you've got at least 4 podcasts now, and all of them, you have this very strong connection with your co-host. You've got John C. Dvorak on No Agenda, Dave Jones on Podcasting 2.0, which I love, Tina on Curry and the Keeper. You've got Mo on MoFax. How do you find your co-hosts? What are you looking for? Some of these, obviously you married Tina, so that was easy to figure out who your co-host was going to be. But how do you find someone and say, "We're a good fit, let's do a podcast together"?
Oh, it's always been the same mechanism. We're a good fit, we're friends, we're talking. Hey, you know what? We should record this. That's how it's gone every single time. That's how it happened with Dvorak 16 years ago. That's how it happened with Mo. We literally were talking for weeks. He'd just call me up and we just talk about stuff, and he'd give me feedback because he's a big No Agenda listener. With Dave Jones, this was very natural to me because I knew that if you're doing this like the first time in podcasting, the daily source code, that was really for the engineers building the product, building the podcast apps, the podcatchers and the RSS feed generators. So that was a natural feedback loop. Now, Dave and I started this project together. We don't really talk at all during the week. We have some conversations, maybe a quick back and forth. It's not even podcasting 2.0 related. So when we are together in what we call the boardroom on Friday, that's real. It's an update from both of us. We're updating each other. We're updating the group. We'll have someone on from, like yourself. We have people who come on who are a part of the whole ecosystem, and we just create this imaginary boardroom, which is, obviously a huge thumb up to the whole concept of corporations and boardrooms, because we're running with scissors, and I love coming up with these little things that fit with our group, like we're running with scissors, oops, instead of, man, my beta crashed, it sucks, I'm back to the drawing board, like running with scissors, yeah, you poked your eye out, good work. And then Tina, I always knew, and I always thought this is something Howard Stern used to say, and I listened to him on K-Rock religiously driving to New York City from Jersey in the MTV and later in my my company days. He would always have his wife Allison, in which he would call her. And he would say, "Just act normal like you are around me. Just be normal." And she couldn't do it. She couldn't be herself. He said, "Yeah, this would be so great if you could just be yourself." And I always thought, yeah, that's right. If you can have a husband and wife who are just exactly the way they are on the air as they are off the air, as honest, it would be great. It would be a super great product to listen to. And Tina is a communications expert. I mean, she for nonprofits. So her last job was chief communications officer at Ronald McDonald House Charities in Central Texas. That's how we met through Ronald McDonald House. She was. They asked me to host their big fundraiser, and she was, in charge of it and was writing scripts. And I'm like, wow, man, where were you when I was looking to hire a communications person in my company? It's very rare. It's very hard. It's a rare talent. It's hard to do. You got to understand a lot of moving parts, and she's so good at it. And I've heard her on radio. I've heard her do television interviews. She has I love her voice, and I love her laugh. And I knew that, if we could just be honest with each other and whatever's going on in our life, and just even the dirty laundry to an extent, that it would be really compelling to listen to. And so I finally convinced her to do a podcast. It was actually after Sir Gene had interviewed her for his podcast, Sir Gene Tuliev, a friend of ours. And she was really nervous, like, who cares about me? I got nothing to talk about. I said, you have no idea. You're so interesting. And that was one of his most downloaded shows. I mean, and people loved hearing her. And so she got a little bit of confidence and said, let's do a show. Every 2 weeks, let's just sit down, just catch up, see how things are going. And as a communications professional, she understood that when the feedback we were getting, she knew that we had hit on something here. And so now I've convinced her for about 2 months now. We've been doing it weekly. So now it's an actual show. Baby, time to come out of retirement. We got to do a newsletter. Let's do this professionally. Let's deliver some great value to people. But it all stems from, hey, I just like talking to this person. I have an extra day in the week. You want to record it and just call it a podcast? It's literally how it's been every single time.
So you've never gone out and tried to find someone, thought, oh, I really want to have somebody to talk about what's happening in podcasting. Oh, I found a Dave Jones. They've all been organic. You're talking anyway, and you go, this is good. The only difference is let's hit record.
Yes, correct. That's every single time. That's how it's been.
There have been a few shows that I know that I want to do, and the thing that stopped me is I'm like, there's not a person that I'm naturally talking to about this. And if you go online, there's all these groups where people are like, I want to start a show about this. Does anyone want to be my co-host? It always surprises me because I'm like, you have no idea what the energy is going to be like, if there's chemistry between the two of you, if you're even going to enjoy the person. And the idea that you're going to jump all the way to the final stage and it's going to work is, I would be really surprised to see if any of those work.
There's people in my life who I think I would be able to do a very interesting podcast with. It's kind of interesting because at the beginning in the early days of podcasting, it was, we didn't even have the name podcasting, and we didn't quite know what to call it. Show, at one point it was Bundle of Joy. It was, we had all kinds of things, but it really, the one that stuck in my, not as a name, but we would talk about, in fact, I think even the New York Times describe it as podcast, or, audio blogging, where people do these odd soliloquies. And it really did come from blogging. And blogging is usually not a team sport, so you're blogging about whatever, and it's one person. And the audio blogging format came from that. In fact, we use the same, RSS technology, just with an addition of an enclosure. So even Daily Source Code was me in a soliloquy, just speaking myself for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour. And it wasn't until I heard the Dawn and Drew show, who were the two wacky kids in a farmhouse in Wisconsin, that I was like, oh, wow, this is really cool. They were married, very young, husband and wife. Like, this is really interesting to listen to, that I'm listening to their life. That's really been, I think the best format for podcasting is, more than one person, where you're in a way listening in on, or in some cases a participant to a conversation. And that's what Rogan is. That's what this is. It can be a guest, it can be a rotating guest, or it can be a fixed person. And I think typically it's just two people that works best. It can be more. But that seems to be what people really associate with a fun podcast, is more than one person, a conversation, regardless of what it's about.
It's really wonderful because there's something, especially the audio only. I know for anyone who's watching this on YouTube, I'd actually recommend go listen to this in a podcast app, because there's something about the audio, especially when you're doing something else. Like podcasting is this one medium that doesn't need all your attention. Like TikTok wants all your attention. Video wants all your attention. Everything needs you locked in. And podcasting is like, hey, we've got a cool conversation for you. You can relax and you can go and do the dishes and you can go for a walk or you can go work out or something. But we know you've got something else going on.
We had a standard in radio. Sorry to interrupt before I forget. If someone let me know that they were listening to my radio show and they said, man, I was listening in the car, I got home, I sat in the driveway for 5 minutes just to hear you finish that bit, that was good radio. And so, the idea that you can capture someone to such a degree that they will not even want to leave their vehicle while they've been driving and doing all this stuff while listening to you, that just shows you how compelling it really is. It can be.
I think that is such a great compliment. I know I've done that with podcasts. Ariel Nissenblatt, one of my friends in podcasting, she says, as soon as I find a good show and I start binging it, that's when my house gets the cleanest. Because when it's good, you just keep cleaning and you keep doing stuff and you do all the dishes and then you go, shoot, I guess I'll go for a run. And then you get back and you're like, oh, I'll do something else because there's something good happening in audio. And it's not, some of the other stuff can almost feel like it's preying on you. Like if I'm on TikTok and 2 hours go by, you're like, that's totally unhealthy. But if podcasting, if you find something really good and it's like, oh, I cleaned too much of my house and I made a great dinner for the family, that's not 2 hours that disappeared. That's 2 hours that became more productive. And you got to listen in on a cool conversation as well.
I have the same, obviously. I mean, I usually do the emptying of the dishwasher and put stuff away. When Tina's out early and says, hey, can you make up the bed? I'm always like, yay. I mean, that means I get to just listen to extra podcast. I listen to a podcast. I take a shower. I put it down with the speaker on loud so I can hear it, but the sound reverberates through a little bounce that I've made right into the shower cell, so I can hear it, and it actually creates a good sound. It kind of envelops me. There's all these different moments in the day, and when I drive to Austin, which I try not to do too much for a meeting or whatever, or even today I'm going to see my periodontist. I'll go to Bernie, which is he wanted me to come yesterday to Kerrville, which is a 25-minute drive. And he said, oh, man, do you mind if we move it tomorrow to the office? And Bernie is 45 minutes. I'm like, oh, yeah, cool. I can listen to the new media show. It's like, and I'm kind of happy about it. So driving to Austin, an hour and a half, like I can get a good podcast in. I could probably start a second one, and then getting back in the car, no matter what I've done. Oh, okay. Now I can just continue listening to the podcast. So that magic is there. That'll never go away. I don't care, how much, videos are being pushed to like, this is where podcasting has to be. By the way, been there, done that, went through that whole cycle. It's not true. It's just not true. For that very reason, it captures you. You need to watch. You have to stick into the watching part. I think most of Rogan's audience doesn't watch. They listen. There's a large commenting audience that likes to, watch something on 15 minutes on YouTube and comment on it. That's just because he doesn't have a feedback mechanism to speak of. But I will always believe in the power of audio. Always, always, always. It is a very powerful medium, and that's the one I'm good at. And I love that. And I think that's where it's also where storytelling is great. This is what the revival of podcasting, even though it was growing, 3, 4, 5% a year, it was kind of completely snowed under by the arrival of YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. When Serial happened, boom, people like, oh my God. And this was at this beautiful moment when everybody was binging Breaking Bad, like, oh, we can watch the whole series in one weekend. People come to work like this, all bleary-eyed. And then there was this compelling story that you could not binge. You had to wait until the next episode next week. Like, oh man, and it became water cooler talk, but you could listen to it on your commute into work, on your way to the water cooler, and it was a story, and it was compelling. And I think for that reason by itself, true crime is the top category in podcasting because of the stories, because it's typically audio only, and people can consume a lot of it, and it's open to interpretation, and they love discussing it with each other.
Yeah, I think there's recently this article that was it wasn't really the 20th anniversary of podcasting, but it kind of was written like, hey, it's the 20th anniversary of podcasting. I don't think that date's right, but they talked about different podcasts that kind of have like really impacted culture. And they talked about the Ricky Gervais show and how it's changed comedy. They talked about true crime, obviously from Serial. And it was just interesting to see the ways that podcasting has not just grown and been its own thing, but impacted. They talk about Song Exploder changing the way that a lot of musicians interact with their audience. And now it's much more of an interactive element, and they're sharing the creative process rather than hiding it. It's really cool just to see podcasting isn't just on its own over here in this little corner tucked away. It's impacting a lot of different areas, and maybe not always like front and center, like, TikTok or video maybe.
In my mind, podcasting, the internet in general, but podcasting broke all the models, broke all the ideas, the whole concept of linear broadcasting is broken. And we're still seeing the final struggling, throes of broadcast media, even cable. But so the way I see the world, it's no longer, and let's start with magazines and newspapers. People still pay a premium for a paper product. They love it. I have one or two that I like holding, and it's a great medium. You can take it on vacation, like a book, a physical book. It's great on vacation. It's not like a Kindle where if you spill some suntan lotion on it, it's okay. That's because I remember I read that on vacation. A little bit of pina colada, drip on it. But in general, online magazines, newspapers, and information has been completely usurped. The New York Times may still have a reputation, depends on what you think of it, what that reputation is, but it's no longer the number one. The idea of being the biggest, the most subscribers, the most readers is completely irrelevant. This is what podcasting has shown us, where you can, regardless of topic. Now, a lot is seen as general information, general entertainment, comedy, etc. But really, any topic can be extremely successful for its own community, for what it is doing. It could be just about your town, just about your weird hobby, your weird sub-hobby of the hobby. All these things can be very successful and fulfilling to both the creator and the recipients. And I believe if you do it correctly, it's a loop. So the people on the other end of the microphone feed back, and they have something that contributes, and it's a continuous loop. So it does not matter. The whole idea of discoverability and all this is horseshit. All you need is word of mouth. Hey, you're into this type of thing, you might want to check this podcast out. And so that's happening with television. It'll happen with movies. It will happen with everything. And the economics are broken of big entertainment, big television, big Hollywood, big movies, because people they're not shoehorned into, I can only watch this at 8 p.m. on a Friday night, and I have 3 other competing programs. Now it's everything all the time, whatever you want. We can't all consume it. So you will gravitate towards what you really like. Now, there will be some topics that will be more popular than the others, but that's usually the personalities behind them, or the personalities that show up on them. Like Rogan, it's not just Joe, it's his guests. Obviously, it's how he treats them. It's what he's able to get out of them. People find that engaging. He's not even a podcast. He doesn't even have an RSS feed. So and they tried to replicate that with at Spotify. We've really been more captured than we ever realized by our media overlords, and to have this complete freedom. And we're seeing it with music. once people figure out that Spotify's not the answer. Spotify's not going to help you sustain. What helps you sustain is if you have a small group of people supporting your band or your music. If your town supports it, if people come out to see your gigs, if they buy your T-shirts, that's the only way these things work. And that also means that not everybody's appropriate. We have 4 million podcasts. I'm glad that everybody's having a good time in creating podcasts, and I hope it's sustaining for you. But if you're thinking I'm going to be Rogan, no, stop. You're not going to be. You're going to be your own little thing in your own little community, and that'll be fine. And if it's not fine, then you should stop doing it.
Yeah. I love this theme that I'm kind of seeing from pirate radio that you're doing, when there's only 2 news stations, and media and entertainment and music, it doesn't have to just be a monolith where everyone listens to one band or is watching one TV show or one thing. And it went from the only way to really get your message out there, because there really wasn't much opportunity, was to rig up an antenna on your roof as a 15-year-old and start broadcasting. And now we have decentralized to the point that anybody can go and they can start a podcast. You can host it yourself. You can host it on Buzzsprout. You can do it on your phone, however you want to get it out there, and you can share it. The red flag, like you're saying, is when you jump 3 levels ahead and you go, and the only way this makes sense for me to do it is if I can be massive and make tons of money, and it's all going to be based on ads, and I know how I'm going to do it. Well, when you start doing all that, you kind of have to almost go back to that monolith again. Like it has to be millions of people listening, or tens of thousands at least, for you to start making the right amount of money. When you think, oh, really am doing this for a community and connection and the way it makes me feel and it's important, or we should talk about this, value for value and getting value back from your audience. When you start looking at it that way, it almost feels like it's difficult to not be successful. Instead of saying I have to get to this massive number to maybe convince some company to give me some money to sell attention away, instead you go, oh, I'm just building something for a community. It makes the transaction much easier.
Yeah. Well, and also the podcasting community, I'll call it that, was already underway after, because once Serial hit, it's like, oh, wow, Spotify's buying companies for hundreds of millions of dollars, which we now know was a failed strategy. Let's just admit it. They spent this money and it just didn't pan out. But with that came something new, which was the podcast industrial complex. And this podcast industrial complex, they're all about money. And it's all about numbers and position and ad numbers and CPMs and how many downloads you need before you can be considered for programmatic advertising, blah, 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 blah. And the people, as you said, like people jumped ahead of themselves. So now that all of that's not working, I mean, yeah, of course there's some successes, but it's not a strategy for people to podcast like, oh, I need to get these levels and then I'll get there and then Spotify will buy me. Well, the Spotify part's already gone. The advertising part has slumped. But now, and I saw this happen in 2008. Now it's like, it has to be video. If it's not video, it's not working. You're not going to be successful. And then with that came something that I have a problem with. I don't have a problem with any of that, but I have a problem with people calling what I do open podcasting. It's podcasting. Everything else is closed podcasting. So the capitulation is in the words. So change your words, change your world. We're podcasting, and podcasting is decentralized, is with RSS, and thank God for the, and I mean that sincerely, for the decentralized nature of hosting companies. We have a lot, and it's pretty evenly distributed. Yeah, some are bigger than others, but from Buzzsprout to Blueberry, from RSS.com to Captivate, this is you can choose your host, you can choose your features, you can move around, whatever you feel like. But there's choice. There's lots and lots of choice, and I think that's really good. And to be able to get your right price, there is a price involved, whether you're doing it at home yourself or using a hosting company. It's relatively inexpensive to do, and if you're not finding joy and fun out of doing it from day one, if you're striving for something that may come, I mean, good luck. That's gonna be a tough journey. Then you're probably not even doing it right. I know it sounds weird, but if you're trying to be the next fill in the blank, that's not going to happen. Be you. Every person is great as an individual, and you have friends. And it's like when I started my little pirate radio station, my FM station home, my audience was the kids in the neighborhood. And they were my friends, and they would tell me what they thought and then bring over their records and play this. That's what it's about. It wasn't for me about, and then one day I'll be the biggest radio DJ in the world. No. In fact, I never achieved that. Never. And I never will. I'm just the guy who has, 900,000 people listening on No Agenda and 9,000 to Curry and the Keeper. And I get equal amount of joy out of both of them for different reasons. That's what it's about.
Yeah, listening to all these interviews of you over the last few days, I kept getting this feeling of like joy. You're just really enjoying what you're doing.
It beats working.
It does beat working. And if it can accidentally turn into your work, then your joy is doubled. If you go into it with like, well, what's the most popular? This is the question I get a lot. What's the most popular type of podcast? I want to make it big. And I'm like, dude, you just don't do it. That is such a bad idea. Because if you're going in saying the way that I'll enjoy this is when I monetize, and now I'm rolling the dice and doing all this work for the hope of monetizing, for the hope that makes me happy. I'm like, that's a lot of work for a really small chance at a payoff. But if you go into it, your measure of success is, I'm really hoping to create something so good that somebody says, I stayed in my car 5 minutes after I got home. If you're trying to make that probably will happen then. And you're going to feel incredible when it happens. So I actually ask podcasters a lot now, what's the thing that you got from podcasting that is not money? Because as soon as you take money off the table, people start telling you really important things. They start telling you like, oh, I got to finally interview one of my heroes. Somebody started a comic book podcast, and all of a sudden he was interviewing people he'd read their comics as a kid, and now he's doing the interviews. And he's like, I can't believe like I'm getting to do this. Yeah, I only have a few thousand subscribers, so I don't make money from it, but it's awesome. I get to connect to my heroes. People who said they became close friends with interviews they did. Somebody said she reconnected with her brother through her podcast. Like, these are really cool things. And if we can get that, if we're just going into saying, hey, let's have fun and let's enjoy it and connect, well, it changes your approach and it makes it much more likely that you'll succeed versus going in on the front end saying, I'm going to try true crime. I don't really care about true crime, but I've heard a lot of people listen to it, so maybe I can make that work. And all you're doing is you're inventing a new job for yourself. You already have a job. And now what are you doing? You're doing all this work to invent a new job?
So No Agenda did not start as a job. No Agenda started as Dvorak and Adam on a Skype call. I was in London. He was in San Francisco once a week. We just go through the papers and say, here's what the Financial Times is saying, or the Daily Mirror or whatever. He'd be like, oh, that's interesting. Here's what I'm reading over here. And we'd compare. And it was, we talked for maybe 20, 25 minutes. And so at a certain point, we literally said, I think he said, why don't we just record this and we'll just turn it into a podcast. We work at a podcast company. So yeah, that's a good idea. What we're going to call it? Oh, we have No Agenda. Good, we'll call it No Agenda. But then what happened was, because of the feedback we were getting from people, it turned into like a lot of time. And that's when we said, if you really want us to do this, we can do lots of things with our time. So you need to provide some value back. And that's when we started, it started initially as like, hey, give us $5 a month. And we got the predictable results. We got like a couple of $5 a month donations, which did not compensate for our time. And then we said, do whatever you want to do. Whatever this is worth to you, whatever value you're getting out of it, send that back to us. We don't know how much you can afford. Can't look at your wallet. $5 may actually be a lot of money to you a month. So if that's what it is, thank you. We appreciate it. And within a few days, we got more $5. We got a remarkable amount of $50 and several $500. I'm like, whoa, I don't know what value this is. I don't know what valuable is to someone. That's only the person on the other end who can determine that. And then we expanded that to time, talent, and treasure, which means you can help us out tremendously if you build a website for us. We're not going to go out and hire, and we can't afford to hire somebody to build a website and maintain it from the amount of money we're getting. We just can't. So it would be great if you could do that. We've had more websites than any podcast, I think. We have new album art for every single episode. We have infrastructure that has really cost us consistently, despite the amount of traffic, $500 a month in fees, which has been run by, one of our producers, Voice Zero, Mark, up in the northern part of the Netherlands for 13, 14 years. I mean, the chat room, is the troll room, as we call it, it still is. It's irc.zeronode.net. It still has chat room, and it's been running for over a decade. And, sure, some stuff falls by the wayside. Someone else pops up and takes over and does it. So this whole idea of value for value was really good. But above all, in every single instance, it's about the community. It's about the people who are on the other end, who are feeding stuff back. So I know, and podcasting 2.0, you could not, even if you had the money, hire all the brain power and the experience that works on podcasting 2.0. You could not ever, they would never be able to get along together. You couldn't even put them in an official meeting. It would not work. I know, I've built big companies, no way. So the people that kind of surround themselves around the podcast portion of it is beautiful. Is one of the most successful business ventures I've ever put together, and I don't get paid, but I get joy out of it as a business professional, as a process professional, someone who likes building podcasting and expanding it and turning it into even better than it was initially, with new features and now putting in, the value for value payment system. And part of that is because we literally built in to the flow of the value. Everybody gets to participate, not just a podcaster who gets some money from a corporate sponsor. No, it's the listener who gets to send value, and they're sending value all the way down the chain with little splits going to the app they're using, to whoever the podcaster wants to cut in on the deal, to even now, as we're experimenting with music. So that, when we play a song on Podcasting 2.0, the wallet switches, it all goes to the musician. This is mind-blowing stuff. We're going to upend the entire music industry that's been in place since, the early 20s, really, and expanded with all these different organizations and performing rights organizations and publishing and all this stuff. And we're going to completely change it to something for the people, literally by the people, for the people, and all the same people benefit all the way down the line. This is the legacy, man. This is stuff I'm really excited about.
The first few times I heard people talk about value for value or Lightning Network connecting to podcasting, I caught myself rolling my eyes at it. I was like, okay, I think Bitcoin is going to be really big, but I don't get why we have to build it into podcast apps. I don't get it. And then in prepping for, you and I did an interview back 6 months ago, and then prepping for this one, I went back and I listened to you talk to Howard Stern in 2010. And I went back and found old clips of you and you talking on podcasts. And I found over and over, you're on the radio when no one's on the radio. Then you get on MTV when MTV is big. And they tell MTV, hey, we got to get on Usenet and start talking to people and figuring out what they like in 87. And then in 93, you're like, hey, we got to get on this internet, the World Wide Web. This is important. And someone at MTV yells at you, you go, fine, I'll just register MTV.com myself. Actually, I'm going to quit and go start a tech company and then sell right at the most important time. Over and over, I'm like, oh, Adam kind of is seeing a little bit ahead and going, this is actually going to change a lot. And there's multiple times people are like, nothing's going to change. It's going to be the same way. It happened multiple times. And now when I look at, I think the decentralized nature of podcasting and value for value, because it's not this iron grip on I have value and I will only exchange it for what I deem an appropriate amount. When you let that go, so many cool things can happen. And you wouldn't be able to get multiple new websites spinning up. You would never with podcasting 2.0. You're right. You could not wrangle all of the people who are investing and putting time and effort into it. There's multiple times I see somebody who's working in podcasting 2.0 and I go, dang, they're putting a lot of work into this. That's really cool what they're working on. And then you realize this is somebody who's making well into six figures and is putting a good amount of time into something for free. So if you were to try to capture that value and I'll pay you to do the work, this would be wildly expensive. And probably these are people you couldn't really hire anyway. And so there's just something beautiful about once you say, hey, I'm not trying to extract value from you. I'm trying to connect. And I'm just interested if you find what we're doing valuable, let's get you onto the team. Then some really cool things start to happen.
There's a lot of analogies here. And let me start first with, yes, I'm 10 years too early with everything. And I always just kind of gave up and went okay, so, I'm 10 years early. I come up with ideas, I pave the way, I motivate people, and then eventually 10 years later, someone makes $1 billion off of it, and it's never me. And that's just my role in life. I understand now much better, if I look at the things that I've been creating, that this is, I believe, a godly thing, this is my role to play. And so my reward, I get it along the way, but I know where my ultimate reward is. And I'm just being used in a good way, and it's very humbling, actually. But what's cool about it is when you understand that everyone just wants to kind of be a part of it. Who are you? I'm with the band. Oh, okay. What do you do? Well, I lug the cables around, but I'm with the band. There's an old joke where the guy says, the two friends meet after several years in a bar. Says, what are you doing? Oh, I'm in finance. What do you do? Well, I work at the circus. What do you do? Well, here, I'll give you some tickets. Why don't you come by the circus and you'll see. And his buddy goes to the circus, and he sees the whole show, the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey circus. He doesn't see his buddy until after the show. He's walking outside the tent. He sees his buddy shoveling elephant crap. He's like, dude, I thought you were with the circus. He said, yeah, but you're shoveling elephant crap. Why don't you leave and do something else? He says, leave show business? So it literally is, I'm going to determine how much someone has to pay for it. That's not even true. Silicon Valley makes that determination for you. You don't really determine how much someone's going to pay for something. You put in artificial levels that have kind of been predetermined and have been sold to us as, a song is 99 cents, or, a higher quality version is $2.99, or any of this stuff. Or virtually free if you look at Spotify. So there's a model that is determining value in a very unfair way. So when someone builds a website or does a piece of art, the value is, the art is a good example, because on every show we discuss the previous episode's art, and we discuss why we chose this piece, but we also, more importantly, critique and tell people why we didn't choose theirs, which is real. You don't get that in real life. You just don't get a phone call. No one says, hey, man, you blew it here, here, and here. And no one has time to tell you why you weren't chosen. You just don't get chosen. And it's disappointing. It's like actors. It's a horrible profession because they never tell you why you didn't make it. So when it's interesting, because right now there's a discussion on the GitHub about value for value, which is very entertaining to me. And it's also in a way very sweet, where now a group is trying to figure out how to make value for value work with PayPal, with dollars, with fiat money. And they're missing all of the beautiful points of what Bitcoin and the Lightning Network delivers, which is the total self-sovereignty. Not that, a lot of people have Albi wallets and, that's centralized, but you don't have to. So the idea that you control your value, you send it, when you feel like it and how much you want it to be. And no one has to determine that you'll get a payout when you hit $5 or anything like that. The whole point is that decentralized nature of micropayments and it being completely in control. And they also didn't really talk about the splits in there, which is the most beautiful thing about it. But I mean, when Dave and I saw this, we saw the Lightning Network and we were talking about it. It just made so much sense. For the first, we've always been promised micropayments. No one ever did it because it wasn't possible because of the fee structures and the regulations around it, and and the centralized nature of banking. So it was such a natural for us, already having decided to go value for value with the entire project, which is like, hey, if you guys are getting value out of it, send it back to us. By the way, thank you to the entire Buzzsprout team who have been one of our big supporters every single month. There's hundreds, sometimes $1,000 coming in from the Buzzsprout team, which is, and I get it because you guys get value out of it, and I know why, and it's understood, and we appreciate it, and I think you appreciate what we do. That's clear. We have a value exchange, and if you didn't send us anything for a month, it'd be cool too. It's fine. No one's going to get mad, because if we can't pay for stuff, then we'll just do less, whatever. So it works out. The market forces are perfect there. But when you have the ability to give everybody a piece of the action from I use sovereign fees because we have all these new features which just wouldn't be possible on any standalone host at the moment. Stephen Bell, who is an electrical engineer by trade during the day, he does that. I give him 10% of every value split I have because that is valuable to me. And that doesn't mean that he can quit his job, but he's on an hourly, minute by minute basis, he's seeing value being returned, and it makes you feel good. It's the same as getting credit for making an end of show mix or sending in an article. Hey, I got this from so and so. Thank you for this article. That makes people feel good. It's in our human nature. So when you can split that, and that's the beauty of the Lightning Network and the system that we've devised, when you can split that technically, well, I would say theoretically, into infinite amounts. Technically, it does run into some scaling issues at a certain point. And we have 12 people we're splitting money up with. It still works. Who knows why? It still works. That is, everyone's participating, and it doesn't matter how much. It's just a number. It's a Satoshi. A Satoshi is worth 0.0003 cents today. It could be $3 tomorrow. I don't know. It doesn't matter. No one's living off of this thing. But when you see that value come in, and we know, Dave and I know, hey, we can pay the server bills this month. That's joy right there. That's super joy. When anyone else, who's just doing something to contribute has the possibility of seeing a value in real time come back from the people you ultimately created for. So Hypercatcher, I give them a split. And that's for the chapters. Drebs Scott does the chapters. So when someone is listening to one of my podcasts and they see the chapters, the people who literally were responsible for the execution and the technical part of that are getting a little piece of that action that you send to them. This is a supranatural thing that is taking place here. It is really, value for value is something totally awesome. And I mean that. I don't use that word often. It's awesome.
I'm noticing now value for value is very also related to this feedback mechanism you've built into a lot of different things. You built it into your podcast, but it was important to you on the radio. It was important to you during the MTV days, trying to get audience participation so that the creation of the podcast is not just two guys who sit on top and they tell it, they say it to everybody. It's not just you and your co-host, or it's a audience participation. So what are you doing to build that audience participation into all these shows?
As simple as, reading an email that comes in that whenever, it's all aspirational. So when you read an email, people think, oh, if I send an email, Adam might use it if it's interesting enough. With value for value and what we have in the apps, there's the same thing. A boostergram will get read. But what I like, for instance, what Fountain is doing, what I think Podfriend is going to do as well, is you can send a boostergram and it shows up under that episode as a boostagram, and that you're communicating two things. One, you're communicating a message, and the other one is you're communicating a value you assigned to posting that message or whatever you're commenting about, and people see it. So 10,000 sats. Wow, he must really feel strongly about what he's saying. 7777. All these things that people are creating within the show. Running with Scissors, I don't remember who, I don't think we came up with it, Then we get Running with Scissors jingles. We get all kinds of weird stuff. This is a creative process that people are doing. It's not just one person, it's multiple people. If my God-given talent is probably picking up on these things and reusing them, trying to see if they catch on. I guess that's kind of how I build community, with phrases, words, slogans, ideas, comments, people, just using that.
So do you think it almost reminds me a little bit of like improv, what you're doing? You're allowing everybody to say something and you're almost always saying yes and. It's not just the person you affirm because you read their email. It's all the other listeners who are going, oh, if I engage, I will get something back. Because the thing we're all really afraid of is I listen to your podcast and, oh, wow, 900,000 people listen every week. Yikes. I guarantee, I know if I write him, he's going to be so full of himself. He'll never respond. He'll never care about me. She'll think it's weird that I reached out about her podcast. Like, oh, she'll never want to talk. And then they see, oh, wow, Adam's reading this stuff online. He's actually reading the emails. And he's checking out the boostagrams. This show actually cares that I'm a listener. Well, cool. Now I don't feel scared. Instead, I feel a little bit like, yeah, maybe I will go throw up a goofy website that I think makes sense and I'll share with the host. I bet they're going to love it. And boom, every time that you affirm it, you just get more and more freedom for the whole audience to engage with the show in a deeper and more meaningful way.
You're exactly right. And that's the whole secret. In fact, if you really ask me what is my job, I used to watch a lot of C-SPAN to get clips and stuff that just wasn't available. We've talked about it so much, and it's so apparent the things we're interested in. And now I go through probably about 130 emails a day, and it's really email is the main. It is the inbox for me. Although I look at multiple sources that people use as inboxes, and that's after filtering out, the hundreds of stuff that I don't need to look at. I can look at later. Some people even have their own special mailbox. They send me so much that, I say, I have 250 emails, but, 70 of them are from this one guy. So he gets his own email box, and I go look at him after I've gone through the inbox because there'll be a lot of redundancy. I also always say, if you're thinking, I'm not going to send this to Adam, he already knows this, wrong. That's exactly the one I've not seen yet. It's weird how that works. So never be afraid to send me something you think I've already seen. Also, if I don't answer, it's not because I don't love you. It's not because I didn't see it. It's because I just don't have the time to answer everybody. And a lot of people, when you answer, then they say, "Hey, you're welcome," and they want an email thread. I can't do that either. So I have to be efficient, and I'm very transparent about it. But yeah, I read everything. Everything. It's always going to be that one. Even the guy that sends 70 a day. There's going to be one thing in there that's going to blow my mind. It's going to be exactly the right thing. So that's what I spend all my time on.
But one thing I would like to ask, I've noticed right now, it seems like it reminds me a little bit of podcasting when it started. With Podcasting 2.0, there's some of the same things kind of happening. You have started, you've got a co-founder with you, you had Dave Weiner helping start podcasting, then you did Daily Source Code, you had a show, you had your own directory that you eventually gave to Apple when they wanted to actually put a directory into iTunes in 2006. That story blew my mind. But then we're doing it again now. You started a directory, you've got a co-founder in Dave Jones, and you're doing a show, Podcasting 2.0, telling everybody about what's happening in podcasting. So have you noticed this resonance that this is happening again?
That was by design. So the only thing I knew, well, it literally started from there when Apple started taking podcasts out of their index, when they started tinkering a bit with their API. I think it was the Apple News podcast, which you could get it from the iTunes database, but you couldn't get the original feed source or the original file source. Whoa, okay, so they're not delivering on, they're not really doing something that's beneficial to everybody. I figured it was time, and that's when I called Dave. And actually, I heard about this Above Tech podcast of Marco, who was very dependent upon the iTunes database with Overcast. He was talking about, was pointed out to me by Sir Wunderhelm in Finland. So all these people kind of said, hey, something's going on here. And I've been, friends with Dave for now almost 14 years, but at 12 years at that point. And we built all kinds of stuff together. And it usually go like, man, I got a great idea. What if we do this? And it was all around RSS, feed aggregation, OPML, which is outline process markup language, decentralized social media, all these things we've just been trying. Nothing really hit. We usually, Dave would go, yeah, cool idea, let's build it. And that means he would build it. And, I would break it. Our series, our cycle is idea, Dave builds, Adam breaks, rinse and repeat. And so we both like it. If he doesn't build anything he doesn't want to build, if he's like, I don't feel like building that. Okay, I'll talk to you in a few weeks or whatever. It was a great friendship. And then, but certainly Dave had a lot of experience in feed aggregation. And so it was very natural to say, dude, why don't we just build our own index? And this time, instead of giving it away to someone like Apple, let's give it away to everybody. Let's make it free and available for everybody. Let's have an API that is kick-ass, that we can build and build and build whatever developers want. And let's bring developers in, and let's see if we can build some cooler apps, and we'll stand for something like you're in here. We're not going to take you out unless it's for a very legitimate legal reason, and just see where it goes. And then we'll add in this incentive model with this new thing called the Lightning Network. And of course, Dave went, okay, and then so he started building it, and it took several months, and probably like every other initiative in the podcasting space. We set up 11 tiny servers that very slowly sucked everything out of Apple. We literally just like slowly until we didn't want to, look, spam them or anything or DDoS them. So we just wanted to look like users. So it took months. To slowly get everything out of Apple's database. But by then I'd set up podcastindex.social because Mastodon ActivityPub was now a thing. And this was a great meeting place, which was purposeful, but I didn't realize how good it would be, because typically these projects are on a GitHub, and you have discussions and issues and posts and arguments and flame wars, and putting it into a social media timeline type idea where you can, subscribe, easily mute or block or whatever, just made sense. And people started showing up, cool people like the Swedish Trickler, Christopher Eiseen, again, the nickname. And his specialty, for his own reasons, he likes collecting RSS feeds. And so he would just say, I got like another 10,000 RSS feeds from French radio stations. It's not even in the Apple index. And then, Marco from Overcast, he said, crap, this is great. I'm still going to use iTunes, but there's all kinds of things that the index would be great for. And so we started exchanging data, and he would help us out with iTunes IDs if he found something we didn't have. That's all automated now. He doesn't use much of the index, but he does. And by the way, he also supports the index with money. And then all these cool dudes started, and dudettes. We have some women out there who started showing up and started building stuff and started building different kinds of podcast apps. And so from day one, the only thing I really replicated for sure, purposefully, was the podcast. I said, we need to have a podcast about what we're doing, and we'll talk about the people who are doing it. So that's all we did from day one, is talked about the people who were building all this stuff and the discussions we were having. The developers, there was a couple of weeks there in the beginning, let's have a dev meeting on Saturday, and we'll all get on Jitsi and we'll talk about stuff. Predictable results. It faded after a couple of weeks. It just doesn't work that way anymore. People have their own timelines, their own agendas, but we all have this, let's make it all work together. And we have people that we don't get along with. people don't get along with me. People really don't like me, but they're still in the project because they have just as much right to influence and move this whole project forward however they want. And by the way, anyone could fork off the whole thing. You want to start your own index? Here's the database. Go ahead. We publish that. So we're completely open source, completely transparent. All the money that comes in goes to paying for the servers and for our infrastructure. We've even helped some other people with their infrastructure just to make sure it was up and running, so that, we didn't lose something. We use it for that. And then all the Bitcoin that comes in, it stays on the node. We provide people with millions of Satoshis of liquidity channels, opening them, closing them. And this is, as I said, is the best job I've ever had. And we don't take a penny. We pay taxes over the money comes in. The only thing we do is we take a little money out to pay for the tax amount we have to pay. That's all. That's the only. So, it's completely above board, legit. All the learning that went into the early days, including giving credit, because the one thing that in my enthusiasm I didn't do well is I didn't credit Dave Weiner properly. And that pissed him off to such a degree that, and he's also kind of a guy who thinks he doesn't get credit for a lot of things, and he has to look at his own attitude and lifestyle, how, why those reasons are. But I repent for that. I was like, hey, I created podcasting. Well, no, I didn't. And in fact, it wasn't just Adam and Dave. It was a whole bunch of people. Same thing here. It's not just Adam and Dave Jones. It's, yes, we started it, we got it going, but all the, namespace ideas, we didn't think of all that ourselves. We didn't come up with a Lightning Network. We just cobbled some stuff together, and all these people are a part of it. Podcasting 2.0, we are in the boardroom. We're running with scissors. We're a bunch of crazy people, and we're pirates. We are literally pirates, and we're putting stuff out there, and people are grabbing it, and what sticks, and what doesn't falls away magically. And, it's clear that this is here to stay. It's clear that the index is now become more important than ever, because there is deplatforming going on. There's also demonetizing going on. So this is the place where you won't get deplatformed. You won't get demonetized. You'll meet a whole bunch of friends and fun people who can help you move your idea, your product, your podcast forward. Everybody's a part of it. Listeners, developers, producers, musicians, you name it, it's all in there. No one's better than the other. And we have this common value flow that you can be a part of, which seems to be the thing that always keeps people engaged. I never feel left out because I get a Satoshi a minute from the system.
I love it. I love it, Adam. I love that it's come back to pirate radio. It's just, we're all out there. Everyone's jumping in. They're doing the stuff they want to do. No one's being coerced to work on this project. No one's being tricked to do it by being paid. They're doing it because they see some value there. They see something that's important. And what's very cool is it brings together a lot of people who don't agree, may not even like each other.
Don't, for sure. There are people who don't. There are people I don't like. People who don't like me. For sure. For sure.
And we're all working together to build a cool podcast, future for podcasting. And I love it. Thank you so much for spending so much time with me. I know we ran over. I honestly could do another 3 hours. I have so many things that I would ask you. So I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, brother. And thanks for this little chat.